yours truly, Val's the DJ Dani. And I mentioned we have the leader of the opposition, political leader of the People's National Movement, and we are very honored in studio to have such an esteemed guest. So we would do this and we say good morning to you, Dr. Rowley.
Good morning to you. Good morning, listeners.
All right, so it's no secret that it is election time, and given that sampling fever, it's election fever. Now, right now in Trinidad and Tobago, lots of questions being asked and paradigms being shifted. People are rethinking, and of course, politics is the order of the day. Now, you being here this morning, it's quite obvious. It shows that an acknowledgement, especially of the demographic we hold, with the age group especially, of your need to reach out, and people need to understand what you're about, what you're bringing to the table, what is the People's National Movement about come this new election time, this new time for government to change, as the case is. So we are realizing that on the issues of the young people especially, and I use that phrase loosely, the concerned citizens on any age group right now is crime as one of the forefront aspects. Now, regarding crime, what would you suggest? Or maybe, because I know it's a national security issue, so sometimes you can't, people ask, well, what are you going to do about crime? How are you going to tackle this? You cannot divulge especially the intricacies or what the word I'm looking for, exactly what you're going to do. But as far as tackling crime head on, if only to appease the masses, what sort of measures or implementation that the People's National Movement is going to undertake in the beginning?
Well, the very first thing that we would do is to ensure that the police service is effective and functioning up to speed. And to do that, we've said that you need to have confirmed leadership at the top. We've had an acting commissioner of police now for about 2 years, and that is unacceptable. So one of the first things we'll do is to abolish the current arrangement, which is very cumbersome, and put something in place which allows us to appoint a commissioner of police who would be now fully in charge and not be a 10-day officer. And such an officer would be in a better position to take charge of the affairs of the 7,000 or so people under him. And we also talk about introducing into local government, local constabularies. So those areas which do not now have local constabularies would have it by about approximately 100 police officers in each corporation. Specifically for improving patrolling and strengthening communities and to bring about a sense of security at the community level. So we have 15 subdivisions in the country, 14 in Trinidad and 1 in Tobago. And given the nature of the problem that we're facing and the effect that it's having on us, it's our view that if we add this aspect of policing to the country, that it would bring about a significant change in our security and crime reduction arrangements.
Well, just to point out, with regarding to appointing a permanent commissioner of police, the bureaucracy, the red tape that would involve, you mentioned abolishing certain things, like the time frame for something of that nature, is it?
It can be done immediately.
Okay,
what is happening? What is in place now is a very cumbersome arrangement where we have to go out in a 7-phase process.
Okay.
And the first process is to find an agency outside of Trinidad and Tobago to take charge of the process, and then finding that agency is itself.
Yeah.
It's now 3 years they've been trying to do that, and then when you find that agency now has to invite applications, and then they do the evaluation, then they make a recommendation to the Police Service Commission, who makes a recommendation through the President to the Parliament, and by the time that is over, it's just ridiculous.
It's exhausting.
And so we're saying, let's just get rid of all of that. We should be able to appoint a commissioner of police by having a body like the Public Service Commission or some similar body, inviting the applications, looking at the offerings, evaluating them, making a recommendation. If it has to come to the Parliament, then it comes to the Parliament and be dispensed with. But you can't have a commissioner every 6 months going up to get his copybook checked and marked and scolded.
Yes.
It's just that's not how you run an organization, and it has, as far as we're concerned, it has demoralized the country, and we need to fix that fast.
Well, I guess being in opposition for the last 5 years, you would have given yourself enough time to put things into place and really investigate how going about this measure you're going to be taking now. So I guess by now you've been more or less validated in the need for this.
Oh yeah, we've put this. We've said this from very early, since October 2010, when the new government came in.
Yes.
That's when the new commission was being appointed, and we said then we should change it because it is not working, and there was agreement all around that we should. And then those persons who were appointed in 2010 got their contracts terminated midterm, and since then we haven't had a commissioner appointed because we're being told that the system is so cumbersome, but I don't think that any effort is being made to do it.
So it is doable in regarding the reformation of it. Is there's nothing stopping it?
It's a simple majority in the parliament,
Okay.
and once a government wants to do it, you can do it. It doesn't require a special majority.
Okay. Well, I mean, I monitor social media a lot. I listen to across the board, the Twitter, the Facebooks, and a lot of sentiment is being expressed about the crime situation and how there's an upsurgence of it. And if we would just only maybe enforce the death penalty or bring back the hangman, and see that in a lot of comments, especially where the public is affected by, say, a drive-by shooting, somebody gets killed innocently standing there. You know, how do you intend to, or maybe I should say, do you think the death penalty will be a sufficient deterrent to the crime situation? And especially as we've seen an upsurgence in gang warfare, and, you know, the spillover is affecting the public really.
Well, I'm a supporter of keeping the death penalty on the books. The PNM supports the maintenance of the death penalty, and the majority of people in Trinidad and Tobago support it. There is a very strong view opposite, but our view is that the penalty should remain on the books and it should be utilized in the appropriate cases. However, before you could execute anybody, you have to convict them. You have to try them. You have to arrest them. You have to charge them. And long before you deal with the minority who are to be executed, you have a majority who you don't even find when the crime is committed. Our detection level is very, very low. And sometimes it's the same person doing it over and over. Sometimes it's other persons joining the list. We need to first improve our detection. So when a crime is committed, especially a capital crime, that you have a very good chance of being caught, and then evidence is collected to be taken to court, and that evidence could bring about a conviction. And after that conviction, and after all the various appeals and all the, only then does that penalty come into being. So to say that the death penalty is a solution to the problem is to hold it by the tail. That is the end of the process. Right now we're being told that the detection level for murder is 3%, which means that of every 100 murders, if they're being committed by different people, only 3 persons are going to be caught. Now that is unacceptable.
Totally agreed. And even with instances of crime, you see crimes against children and, you know, young people, I think increasing within the past few months. A lot of people are saying we need a sex registry list. We need a list of people that commit these crimes. Because a lot of time, as you say, it's repeat offenders. You know, what do you think, or how do you think that should be implemented? And should it be soon?
Well, it should be soon. I think all the steps are taken. And if I'm not mistaken, actually I just said something which I have to correct. You need a special majority to change a police
Commissioner.
But there's agreement, and there has been agreement.
Right.
Between government and opposition, and unless they change their mind and do something else, there should be agreement to get it done. So I'll admit that's corrected. If my memory serves me right, we are in a position now, and I think I saw a notification where this sex registry is about to be implemented. So we are close to doing that. So we've taken all the steps to get there. That will assist in identifying and monitoring persons who have been deemed to have offended. But that's one aspect of it, because you always have new ones coming on.
Agreed.
That wouldn't be on the registry.
But at least I know in the communities you would see the names of the people that may have been convicted. You know,
And the record has shown that these kind of crime, they're repeat offenders.
Exactly.
Who do the same heinous crime over and over. So the idea of a registry is so that you can better monitor such persons.
All right. So I guess the approach, what you're saying is like regarding to crime, it's going to be holistic with reformation of all aspects and all either end of the spectrum, from detection to the judiciary to rehabilitation.
You're entirely correct, because when we talk about crime in our national community, it's not a single point arrangement. There are a whole series of things, from parenting. I like to start there. parenting is an important part in treating with the crime scourge in the country. There are parents who need to take responsibility for their children. There are children who need better nurturing. The effectiveness of the school system in creating the values of young people. The whole question of the exposure of young people to negative situations. Then the people who are required to dispense the social support systems. All of these things are involved in the effort to rid the community of the effect of crime. Crime is caused by a variety of activities and a variety of developments. It's not because you're hungry you commit a crime, or because you are sexually depraved. There's a whole plethora of things. And at the end of the day, there's a body of people in the country whose job it is to either prevent crime, detect crime, or prosecute those who are involved in crime, and that's the police. So we want to know that we have a very effective police service to respond to the issues surrounding crime.
Well, I like your answer. What happened is I realized that something has been neglected for decades is social services. Now, crimes committed, and if people are involved with regard to what's we're looking for, counseling. And not just counseling, but you spoke about the homes, about parents have to account for their children. Now, it's difficult for, especially from a Caribbean nation, we have this sort of mentality and nobody could tell me how to raise my child. As far as should you be elected for the new term, what measures you plan to put in place regarding like social services? Is it a reformation? Do you think that it needs work, or is this something that you've been looking at in the past?
Well, it's an area that we have to look at, and we're committed to it. We have a lot of allocations for a number of social support offerings.
Right.
If you look at the national budget, you'd be surprised how much of it is geared towards treating with social support. However, the dispensing of these leave a lot to be desired. Either they're not meeting the people who really need them, and some of it is getting in the hands of people who ought not to be accessing them because the system is so loose and poorly supervised. We can improve on that. And more importantly, there are people who need more and better support and they're not getting it. And so you need to identify that. So we say we'll bring that responsibility down to the local government level. Let the local government departments determine who within the corporations, within the city, within the borough, who qualify after we've set the thresholds. The thresholds are there.
Yeah.
But the people at the local level would be better able to determine exactly who and make sure that they get what is allocated to them. And if there is more to be had, who gets that more? And at the end of the day, we will lift all of these people from where they are to where we want them to be. And of course, if there are inherent problems in the economy, in the whole national basket of activities, then you come up with policies and programs to lift those. Unemployment. You need to know who's unemployed.
Well, of course, because there's no secret crime unemployment directly
You need to
linked.
know who's unemployed. You need to know what skills they have while they're unemployed. You need to know who have no skills and what skills they could try to get, and what programs you put in place to let them get those skills. And that is where the government could play a role. Not just the government paying your light bill or the government putting food on your table. The government has a role to play to get you to a place where you can
sustain yourself.
Yeah.
All right, so on the topic of crime, so I just want to wrap it up before we move on to the other two issues that we want to deal with this morning. Corruption has been a major issue, a major theme that's been reoccurring, and we want to know what are your plans to ensure accountability and transparency, and as a result, eliminate the need, well, I shouldn't say the need to, but there's obviously a lack of prosecution of white-collar crime in this country. And so, how will you ensure that your government maintains transparent, accountable, and if it is that an incident does occur where there might be something suspicious in the procurement process and a tendering process, how do you plan to treat with, holding that person or that ministry or that accountable?
That simply has to be a management issue, and there has to be an acceptance that it ought to be done. Because you see, the government, the cabinet, does not have the authority to prosecute anybody.
Agreed.
And that's something you have to understand. A minister might be aware that something has gone wrong, but the minister can't be the person to go out and take charge of the prosecution. You could have something reported, but you report to another agency, and the actual treatment of the person who has done wrong is the matter for the judiciary, and the cabinet doesn't really have a role in there. However, you need to have systems in place that will, as far as you're able to, prevent opportunities for corrupt practice and identify corrupt practice when it occurs. The bulk of the corrupt practice which we hear about as corruption,
Right.
really has to do with the procurement by the government. The government spends a lot of money every year buying things and disposing of assets and so on. That is where the problem lies. People use that system to take unto themselves what they should not be allowed to have. That is the corruption that is polluting the country. So you hear right now, we're not talking about this government is being described as a contractacy. When you talk about ocracy,
Right.
it's a contractocracy because it's all about contracts. Because the government is entering into these contracts, making checks available to people to do work. The work may or may not be done well or poorly, as the case might be. And in the awarding of these contracts, arrangements are being made, sweetheart arrangements between people high and low, so that they can get this money, which they aren't really entitled to. That is the problem that the country is having. So therefore you need to fix that. And you fix it by putting in place arrangements for the procurement, which will be seen by more than one or a few people. That transparency is the light that will kill the fungus of corruption. And when corruption appears, and it will appear, no government will tell you or should tell you that under my government there will not be corruption. Human beings will always try to be getting more than their fair share. But the key to it is don't have things in place that encourage it. And when you see it, let there be consequences.
What leg or arm is the cases of any government, well, especially in Trinidad and Tobago, is responsible for dealing with these management issues, as you mentioned, and which is directly linked to putting these things in place?
So the process,
The
how do you
process.
revamp the process to eliminate that?
Okay, let's say you're spending government money in a department. There's an audit function. Right? Those who are spending the money are to be checked by the auditors. The auditors go through to see that what was spent in accordance to the accepted process. If it was not, then the auditor will report that this was done improperly. And if a crime has been committed, then it might be fraud, right?
Right.
Then that needs to be reported to the fraud squad. But then is the fraud squad staffed with the relevant accountants and people with audit skills in the relevant number to come in and very efficiently take charge of the process and have a charge laid? The answer might be no. So you might report it. So you would have done your part. But it remains there unattended. And 7 years later, you hear about the girl who had stolen this or the minister who had done why, and nothing happens.
Right, exactly.
Because it has moved out of your sphere of responsibility to another person. And then the fraud squad might say, look, we don't have the skills, we don't have the time, we don't have the whatever. Nowadays, a lot of crime is being committed in a very highly technical way. Is the fraud squad sufficiently staffed to treat with that kind of crime? So we're saying we need a manpower audit of the police service to determine if we have within the police service not just the numbers but the skills to deal with the people who are committing a new kind of crime. And then worse, the people who are supposed to overlook the system, the people at the level of the top management in the country, they can't be seen to be leading the charge in crime and criminality, because that then brings the whole country down to be seen as a corrupt place. And there are too many instances in this country where either the government is encouraging or participating in criminal conduct, which is corruption. And we have to face up to it. That is something that we have to say, this is not acceptable, and the people in office ought not to be exposed to this kind of thing and not to encourage it.
Agreed. So our next issue that we wanted to address was unemployment. Now, we had the lowest rate of unemployment we've seen in 2014, back in the first quarter. Now it's risen. It was 3.3% when we closed out 2014, and now in the first quarter of 2015, it's 3.7%. So it's been increased marginally, but it's nowhere close to what was the highest level of unemployment that we've seen in this country, which was back in the 90s at 21%. How do you intend to, especially with the fall in oil prices, especially when we're seeing some third-party oil contractors laying off people this week, how do we plan to curb that or curb the effects of the fall in oil prices and maintain the unemployment level at the relatively low rates that it is now?
Well, let me start by saying that those who tell you that unemployment is 3.5%, they're the only ones talking that. This country does not have proper statistics on that kind of data. The government will tell you 3.5%, but we've been polling the country in this election.
Right.
And the average constituency, when you ask people, what is your number one issue that's of concern? 10-12% of the population telling you unemployment. Or unemployment issue. There's unemployment and a significant underemployment.
Agreed.
Meaning persons who feel they're qualified for a better job but not getting it. The government's figure of 3.5% is not realistic, right? Because that means that you have full employment.
Pretty much.
Because there are some people who don't want a job and not looking for that job. They will fall within that. That is not the reality. What that number reflects, largely in many instances, are the make-work jobs like URP and CPEP and those kinds of things. And therefore, if you're saying, well, we should take comfort in the fact that we have 3.5% employment, you are accepting that the government is going to fund the expansion of these make-work programs. And while that is happening, the manufacturers are saying, we can't get people to fill jobs within our factories.
Exactly.
Because nobody wants these jobs. So I think the unemployment figure here now is pretty much meaningless. And until we get back to a functioning CSO that gives us real data, which is believable, then we have a little bit of a fog here.
You think like the unemployment issue or underemployment, as the case is stems from this mentality? There's no secret that we here have, I would call it a little bit of a false pride scenario. Meaning that, okay, look at other countries around the world, people coming out of universities loaded with these accolades and all these levels of education, but they refuse, again, underemployment, to take certain jobs. Like people will be working in the fast food places, they're getting the experience, something to put on their resume. They're also legally and meaningfully employed. But in Trinidad, we see an influx of foreign labor taking up jobs that are available that, yes, we can do, but we choose not to do it.
Well, there might be cultural expressions here, but most people like to get the best job that they think they can handle. But you need also to understand that the job that you might go into now is not the one that you will retire from.
Correct.
So a nurse is not uncommon if you go abroad and you go to a restaurant and the person who is serving table is in fact a university student.
Exactly.
Yes.
And might already have a degree and might be going on to another degree, but in the meantime, they're doing waiting on tables or so on. In our society, because of where we've come from and the stigma attached to what they call menial jobs, you may find that people are reluctant to take certain jobs because once you get in there, maybe that's a job that you may try to hold on to, or then you can't get another job that's better and so on. And you don't take a job until you get the one that suits you. But that applies to some people. There are many people who will do it if it's available. I mean, my first job was putting sweet drink in a case in the factory. But I always knew that this was temporary, right? I mean, I'll do this for a while and then until I had my eye on doing something else, right?
Exactly.
So you need to be able to take the job that's available now and keep your eye
on further down.
Yeah, and even while you're in that first job, you're preparing yourself through education or developing a skill or so that when the next job becomes available, you're better able to compete for it. But a lot of those numbers you mentioned, that 3.5% unemployment, is government employment.
Okay.
And that in itself has its own problem. And then when government revenues begin to shrink, then you get all kinds of fallout from that, right?
Which will probably lead me straight into my next question. The oil prices are falling. Globally, they're predicting that it's probably not going to go up for quite a few months, further than December, that we're hearing locally, that, they're saying hopefully after December, the price will return to some kind of normalcy. But what plans do you think your government has, should you be elected, to diversify our economy, to open up maybe new sectors or develop existing sectors? What do you have in place for that?
Diversifying the economy is not going to treat with the immediate problem. If you begin to do things in the context of diversification, you're talking about the medium term. There are very few things you can do overnight to respond to your loss of revenue in what's in front of you.
Right.
Diversification of the economy simply for us mean acknowledging that the oil and gas sector is our bread and butter, and doing in every other area what we find that we can do to expand the economy, whether it is fishing, whether it is fashion, whether it is tourism, whether it's agriculture. All of these things, do within those areas everything that we could do to create additional economic activity. And once you do that, and sometimes there's some big items you could do in the industrialized sector, you're then adding to the size of the economy. Small business, in whatever you might think of. I was mentioning something the other day in Rio Claro. A simple thing like making fruit juices. You might say, okay, well, we can't compete with Dole or Tropicana. But we could grow in this country soursop plants, harvest it, and make soursop juice that our market will gobble up because it's such a good product.
And it's local.
And you can't get enough of it.
Yeah.
I mean, Portugal juice, when Portugal is in season, you can't get enough of it. We could do more of that. We could set out to plant 50, 100, 200 acres of the thing. We're not doing that. We buy a liter of Florida orange juice. It's not cheap, but we pay for it and we complain about the price of the juice. But what is our juice offering on the market?
True,
you might still import some of it, but you don't supply yourself purely on the import. We must be able to add to the marketplace what we can produce. And if we do that, then the farming community can get involved in the production. The consuming population can use these products. And more importantly, if we do enough of it, we have people abroad who would love to have these products produced by us. We have a significant diaspora in New York, in Toronto, in Florida. If we produce some of these things here, and they are of international standard, we can export them. I mean, the same way they export their stuff to us. They are novelty type items, whether they're cocoa products, coffee products, juice products. These are things we can do. And they sound small, but they can be the basis of significant small business.
Agreed.
Well, of course, this leads to food security, and pretty soon we'll be wrapping up. But regarding food security and people getting in, I won't use the term young people anymore. Citizens getting into agriculture. You mentioned that the cultural issue of, I guess no good deed goes unpunished. We educate our children. We pursue these higher levels of education. We find ourselves not wanting to take certain jobs. Now, to get people to get into the agricultural sector, for diversification of the economy, for food security, for employment. But what incentives should be re-elected, the PNM? What incentives do you plan to put in place to get the nation towards that drive, that tangent of getting involved in agriculture? Not just for exportation, but like I mentioned, food security.
Well, agriculture is a peculiar thing. It's one doesn't go into agriculture because the opportunity is there calling you to get involved. Raising animals and growing crops, you really have to like to do it. Because it requires a dedication, which if it is not there, you're doomed to failure. But those people for whom there's an aptitude and a liking, they need all the support they can get. And we're moving towards making it a tax-free area, so that whatever you earn from that area doesn't attract taxation, and what is foregone in tax, you get the benefit by having the product on the marketplace, keeping food prices down, making food available. But of course, you have to ensure that it's not abused, because the minute you have a tax-free area,
exactly,
other people who are not genuinely involved seek now to push their noses in there to get the benefit. So that requires management and, of course, enforcement. You also need to make available to them what is really required. Agriculture, you start talking about land availability. We have come out of sugar across a large section of the country, and there are significant acreages that are now not under sugar, under nothing. And in some areas we did have like citrus and other things there which have been largely abandoned because they've been given to people who have not gone ahead and done what they say they will do, which is to maintain them in production. There's some crops that can be produced and that can find places in the local market which are not now being produced. So we have to find the people who want to do agriculture. And the agriculture we're talking there is not big break backhoe and cutlass and all
It's
that.
using
Like my
the
grandfathers.
tool.
There's some very modern technologies which are very exciting, right? And we need to get more and more of those things. Growing crops in certain kind of conditions, growing certain kinds of crops, which can be as I did hear one person talk about making agriculture sexy. Because apparently only sexy things sell. You see leggy ladies standing next to power saws and things like that. So, but the bottom line is, you get a cohort of the right people. I mean, I genuinely like farming. I mean, left to myself, I enjoy growing things. I enjoy raising animals. So I could be a farmer. And of course, if you're in an environment where farming can be done and you have an aptitude, then those two things together can work. Telling somebody in the urban area to go into farming, into agriculture.
They have no concept of it.
Yeah, and even if they try it, sometimes they aren't prepared. You need to know that you don't water a plant to death, because you can do that.
Yeah.
And you need to know when the plant begins to wilt that something is going wrong, and so on. So those agro communities where the people have a knowledge and a background, that's where you need to look to find the farmers that are missing from our population, and which is why we are focusing so heavily on the east coast of Trinidad and the south coast and Tobago. That's where you have agricultural lands, and you have people who have some knowledge of agriculture. And in that population, you should find enough people to take up the opportunities that we're going to offer.
Okay, so education. You're talking about, finding these people in these agro areas and other industries as well. I mean, a big concern for our youth and people that, want to pursue different areas of education, is the free tertiary education system going to remain in place under PNM government?
Yes, we are committed to the University of Trinidad and Tobago and the role it can play in preparing our young people to participate fully and effectively in this new economy, this expanded economy, this technical economy. So that is a commitment. Unfortunately, we've lost some time and some distance, but as the creator of the University of Trinidad and Tobago, we are committed to it fully, and UWI and the University of Southern Caribbean. We talk about governing the country under data-driven decision-making and policy. So we want the universities to do the relevant research, give the government and the country the data, and the decisions we make will be based not on how we like or how we look or, or how we feel, but what the data says to us. Right? So the universities, we are hoping that the research aspect of the universities feed into the governance of the country, and that young people are prepared at the universities to functionally enter the workforce. So we're committed to that. But we also adamant that where there's waste, where there's corruption in the system, that they must be weeded out, because we can't afford to be spending money, scarce resources, making the minority smart men happy at the expense of the majority. So we whatever our circumstance, we believe that we always will have to have a proper response to education to get out of it. And I'm a living example of that. I came out of a community where my only passport from that drudgery, from that neglect or whatever it was a proper education. And then I can compete not only locally but internationally. And young people have to grasp those opportunities. They're not cheap. Education is not cheap. It's a very expensive undertaking. And we will appeal to young people to take advantage of the opportunities. Because if you don't, then you go about playing the victim all the time and how everything is wrong and everything is bad. But you yourself might have been responsible for not taking advantage of opportunities made available to you.
So take advantage of opportunities, but don't take advantage of it.
Exactly.
Because
no,
again,
take advantage means make it work for you.
Correct,
get involved.
We have a very high literacy rate in Trinidad, and we could pride ourselves on worldwide.
Yeah.
And I mean, it is the tangent ever since. I mean that we are eager learners, but at the same time, there are always people who believe that the opportunity is far-reaching. So penalization, weeding out the corrupted elements regarding people who are taking advantage of the system. I mean, that is something you plan to, like you mentioned, keep in place, because those are the checks and balances to keep the something like GATE as the cases or any other initiative.
But even the laptop
smoothly.
scenario,
The laptop scenario.
thousands and thousands of laptops have been given out over the past couple of years. They've spent a lot of millions of dollars in not just distribution, but trying to maintain and make sure these systems work, because we know technology is the future. And children, as you said yesterday, in 10 years, children might know how to use a pen because they are programmed to work on the computer. They're using a stylus and that sort of thing. But the laptop is another big issue in secondary schools. Will that program continue under PNM government?
We're not simply about just throwing laptops in schools and saying $1 million it costs. The laptops there has to be a purpose behind putting them in the system. They have to be integrated into the teaching aspect of the schools and to be contributing to the preparation of students. That is not happening now in any significant way.
Right.
The government's current arrangement is just buy laptops and distribute them on the grounds that everybody's getting a laptop. When you look to see what role it's playing and if it's integrated into the school system, you realize it's not seriously involved.
Right.
And we need to fix that.
Okay.
Right? And we also think laptops in hand, laptops going home in a bag, you need within the school environment to have, right, a computer room, a computer lab where the children can actually go in the school and in fact be properly trained, right? As against letting them go and do as they please on a laptop, and then you discover that everything else except education taking place.
Yeah.
So we need to rectify that.
All right, well, we have to say thank you very much for gracing us with your presence, and not just 94.7, but you came through the Trent Tobago Radio Network this morning. I mean, you have a busy schedule. Like, I can't even begin to imagine what it's like to be in your shoes this week.
Yeah.
All right, and I know if you've like extended your time this morning, so we say thank you very much,
Well,
Dr.
I must
Rowley.
thank you too. I must thank you very much for having me, and it was a pleasure talking to you and to your audience. And hopefully I do it again sometime.
Well, we see how things go. And again, we wish you well. And of course, you mentioned keeping fit. This week of all, you need eat well, do your exercise.
Keep fit.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you very much. I try to do it. Well, I don't think I get much of that this week in particular, but hopefully in the not too distant future,
Well, at least
I'll
sleep.
get back to a proper regime of exercise, and hopefully there'll be some interesting food to eat.
Fish.
Kingfish.
Kingfish and breadfruit and things like that.
All right, well, once again, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
And we wish you the best.
Thank you very much.